What's up, guys? It's Justin Kahn, and you are listening to The Quest. Today's podcast is with Glen Moriarty. Glen is a psychologist and the founder of 7 Cups of Tea. 7 Cups of Tea is an app that provides online therapy and free support. And since Glen founded the company back in 2013, they've trained over 440,000 listeners around the world and helped over 50 million people. In our conversation, we talked about founding the company, getting funded by Y Combinator, wellness startups in general, the ups and downs of Glen's journey, the power of habits, and how to create companies as a positive force for change in the world, company values, and more. I love how mission-driven Glen is, and also his honesty in really coming clean about the difficulties of building 7 Cups. As someone who's been in therapy and had therapy help me through some very difficult times in my own companies, I deeply admire the work that Glen's doing. And I really wanted to highlight someone using technology to build something positive for the world. So here is my conversation with Glen. So I want to start off with the origin story of Glen and how you got to the place where you were starting 7 Cups of Tea. Zooming backwards, like how did you get up to the point where you were starting the company?
So the story is like, part of it is, growing up, having a bit of a tough, childhood, tough family experiences. And I think a lot of founders experience those things. And, and I think, I don't know any real data on it, but I think people are overrepresented who have been able to endure some level of pain and get through that and figure things out and navigate things. So I think that's just a general startup thing. You agree with that?
Totally. I agree with that. I found it took actually going through the entire startup journey and eventually becoming successful and then going beyond that to realize it. But part of my process was in the last couple of years, I really realized that everything I had done in my entire life was to get the approval of the people around me.
Yeah.
I just wanted the approval that I didn't feel that I got when I was a kid, from my peers, maybe from family members. And so, I had a pretty nice childhood growing up in a lot of ways, but that was a major driving force of Justin,
right.
in everything I did. And that manifested itself for better or for worse, right? Like, it served me for a long time to be successful in some ways, but it was also a mechanism of self-torture.
It's self-torture and enormous drive and perseverance and grit. And all of those kind of core. What's that statement? Somebody says running a startup is like getting punched in the face repeatedly, and then somebody else throws a cookie at you every once in a while, and you just got to look for the cookies.
I haven't heard that. That's an amazing one.
That's what it's like, right? It's like brutal.
Yeah.
So anyways, so for me, I was, I became a psychologist to learn how to better help people. That's really what I wanted to do. And being a psychologist is, it's a lot of work. You go through a ton of it, and then you can help one person at a time, really. And the way you scale it is you do group therapy. So you have 8 people in a room, and that's really powerful. There's a ton that can be done with groups, and I think we can get smart and figure that out in a whole bunch of ways that we haven't yet. But I have another company too. It's an online learning company. And that got me, lifestyle, business, and, being okay financially and everything else. But I was studying offline behavior that hadn't yet moved online. So learning when I was a kid was entirely offline. Then it moved online. Dating was offline. Then it moved online. And I was talking to my wife. My wife's a therapist. And she was listening to me. And it was a startup problem, as so many of them are. And I thought, what do people do who are, founders that don't have somebody compassionate, to listen to them? And I'd been studying, this was 6 months. I was studying offline behavior that hadn't moved online in a systematic way for 6 months. And I couldn't figure it out. And then
was that to try to find a startup problem?
To find a startup problem. Exactly. I was just, because I didn't want to try to create a new behavior. I didn't want to do something that wasn't universal. I wanted to be okay, learning is universal. Everybody wants to learn, but learning is hard. Not everybody loves learning. It's too taxing. There's all kinds of problems with learning. It's just tough. Whereas,
I totally agree. I always say that people say they love learning, but they don't really love learning because learning involves failing a lot until you kind of finally get it.
Yes.
It's like much harder than people think.
It's much harder. And that's real learning. That's like real life learning, which people hate pain, right? It's like that. I saw that you had the Ray Dalio Principles book. His thing that progress equals, or pain plus reflection equals progress, right?
Yeah.
It's like nobody likes pain, but that's how we learn. But even book learning is hard. It's like, hey, focus, neuronal connections, thinking, imagining, like, so I was trying to think of something that wasn't so arduous for humans to do. That was universal human impulse, and studying all these different things. And then my wife's listening to me, and it was like the clouds parted, and it was like, this is it. The need to talk to somebody. This is the universal human behavior that's offline, that hasn't yet moved online. And we should try to figure this out. And so then I submitted to YC, and I was older. I was 36. I did not think there was a chance I would get in at all. I stayed up late. I did the little 1 minute video thing. I could barely keep my eyes open. And Paul Buchheit read the application and was like, "This is a great idea." And then I did I chose the last interview slot, and I had a thought, like, if it goes long, I will think I've got good odds. But if it doesn't go long, I'll think I just blew it. And it ended up going like 17 minutes instead of the 10 minutes it was supposed to go. And I felt really good about it. And I just went downtown, and then PB called and said, "Hey, we want to offer you a slot." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." And then we were in a neighborhood with a bunch of Navy SEAL families. And this was in Virginia Beach. And my wife was friends with all of these spouses, and they would go on deployments. And so it was normal for them to be gone for like 6 months, 4 months, 8 months. And there was like this kind of tight community of people caring and looking out for one another. And so we just decided to see it as a deployment because I had 4 kids. I even had a 1-year-old, which was,
oh, wow.
Really, yeah. And so, then I went out there, and then they came out for a month in the middle. But yeah, we launched it. I was the first listener. My wife was the second. I could never get enough listeners. I was going to like UCLA, trying to get people to listen. And
so the original model was people, you just could come on this app and find someone who would listen to them and talk about whatever they wanted.
Yeah. What's funny is, like, so as a psychologist, you meet face to face, right? So it's like it wasn't until a long time into this that I like realized how difficult we were making seeking mental health support. So like from an internet funnel perspective, right? It's like less clicks, less threatening, the better. Mental health is like 27 steps, super hard steps, and very threatening. Like, come meet with a stranger, fill out all this paperwork, do a deep dive into all the things you don't want to talk about. Call a person, drive there. It's really, really tough. So then below that is video conferencing, still intimate, but less threatening, more convenient. Below that is voice, phone calls. And then below that is anonymous messaging. Mm-hmm. And so we launched with voice, which I already thought was way less threatening than all the other stuff. And so we used a thing called Plevo, which was like a Twilio thing where the person seeking help would call. We'd ring all the listeners. We had 40, 50 at the time. Whoever picked up the call would get connected. And it was voice. And what we found was like 99.5% of people preferred messaging over voice because voice was still too intimate.
Right.
It was too much, emotion, prosody in voice, and there's too much awkwardness with it. But if you do messaging and you make it anonymous, then way more people seek help than they otherwise would.
Makes sense. Like, nobody wants to call a restaurant, right? Everybody wants to text it now. Everybody wants to order everything online, and kind of it lowers the friction to human interaction.
Yeah, and that's food. Like, hey, I need some food. It's not like, hey, this is secret that I've never told anybody, and I just need to get it off my chest.
I'm curious, did you get pushback from the community of, the professional community of therapists and psychologists who are saying that this is too easy, or, it's in a way it's disruptive to the idea of traditional mental health help?
Yeah. So fortunately, we were, really under the radar for a long time. And in 2013, that was really deliberate on my part, because the idea then that you could train a regular person to care for another person was seen as radical. Now it's not at all. Now it's seen as like very obvious, like, yeah, of course, why not? Like, it's just listening. Like, this isn't hard. Anybody can do this. It's not hard. Like, we have all kinds of problems. We should be doing this. But we ended up adding therapists. So we love therapists. I'm a psychologist, I'm a therapist. We have over 100 clinicians on the platform. So we see it like a treatment team where there are volunteer listeners, there are licensed professionals, and there are even chatbots. And together, that combination of people can best help people. So it's not like the Uber where it's like, hey, we want to kill taxi cabs. It's more like, hey, we need you, but you're super talented, so you should be helping the people that really need it. Whereas, like, if somebody else just has like a minor boyfriend, girlfriend, or minor work stress problem, we don't want to clog you up with these kind of minor issues where you could be really helping somebody who's experiencing more depression. And so that triage process, that's how we see it. So now we get no pushback at all. And we have a bunch of people, in the company that are licensed people. And I think that that'll get smarter and better, where it's like right now, the therapists don't yet work with the volunteer listeners in that kind of way, or with chatbots in that kind of way. But I think in the future, it'll be much more streamlined, and we'll be able to help people, significantly better, because that team will be tighter.
So when you launched the company, what happened? How did it go? Was it immediately, was the audience immediately receptive? Was it viral, or, did you kind of have to go through the long dark night of nobody using it to figure out how to get users?
It's really funny. So my first meeting with PB, I was so excited. And, I'd been working on the home site, and, because we were going to help parents with special needs kids. That was the original hypothesis. And they were going to help veterans. And we didn't build any of that technology to connect people. And I'm trying to show him the website, and he's like, did you launch this yet? And I'm like, no, not yet. And that fear, right? Like, was probably not going to work, right? Like, that's like, I don't know if this is going to work. And it was, basically like, okay, we're done. Thanks for coming in, launch it, and then come back next week. And it was like, so, at the time it was like, oh my God, like, but that was such a gift. Like, do it and then learn. And I think what a lot of people don't know is, like, most things are not going to work, and you have to just like keep at it and figure it out. So we did that, and I harassed all my family members, all my friends. Hey, call this service. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. And that's when we figured out, like, the voice thing was too much for people. They were too anxious about it. And then I was sitting on, I had this apartment right down the street from YC, and I would just sit on that. I had this horrible couch. I bought all my furniture secondhand. And I don't even know where I was able to get it. But it was like this really horribly looking floral couch. And I just lived on that thing. And I would live in, Reddit chat rooms, any kind of support room, for like, hours all day long, just trying to listen and see how are people that are in pain, what are they trying to do? Like, how are they doing it? And what are they doing to get out of that pain on the internet? And
what were they doing?
They're mostly just like chatting, and some of them were chatting in chat rooms. Some people were talking on subreddits. There's like a lot of mental health subreddits. There were different like mental health social networks. Those were really the broad, the kind of general solutions. And then I just started inviting some of those folks. And then we started getting we finally launched. And we got a lot of press, and because there was like there really wasn't there was not a solution on the internet to provide emotional support to people. And it was like a novel thing. So then we got a lot of press, and then like a lot of people came, and then that was when the demand was so high, and I could never get in front of it. And I was like super stressed out. And this guy, his name's Robin Steptoe. I will be forever in gratitude to him. He's an old English guy. Was at so I called. I also at the same time I called like 200 nonprofits in the Bay Area. None of them were at all interested in working with me, but one was. Yeah. And it was the Santa Clara NAMI and this lady, Kathy Forward, and she agreed to meet me for breakfast. And so I went and I met with her for breakfast, and she said, "Hey, this sounds like a really good idea. I like it. Why don't you meet my team of, peers that provide support for people struggling with substance use and families and all this other stuff." So I was like, okay, awesome. And then they became our first listeners. And this guy said, and especially that time, it's like, and really all of Seven Cups, it's always been like hey, we're all in this together. How are we going to figure this out? And he said, why don't you put at that time we had this rotating banner at the top of the chat. And he said, why don't you put up a banner that says one of the best ways to help yourself is to help somebody else? And so we did that. And then all of a sudden we started getting people to sign up, that had received help. And so some percentage, and then that helped us finally get in front of that demand.
So as more people came for help to talk to somebody, then some percentage of those people would turn into the listeners who would talk to, listen to people.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And then
kind of scale from there.
And then we had one of the main things is we were just talking about this. We just had our birthday. So we had like a community meeting about our birthday, but we had this group. We didn't even have our own chat room for listeners. So with listeners, when you're chatting with somebody, you might be tough. You might have a question. So you'd have to like go PM, private message somebody else to get help on that. And then they'd give you. So then we had a third party app called Chatsy, where it was our first listener support room. And then, then that kept crashing because it was growing too big. And then we had to finally build our own. But the community really grew from listeners. It was really listeners, caring for the people that are seeking help, but also caring for one another. And that was like kind of the heart of the community. And then we build out forums and more chat rooms and eventually all the other kind of things that we've got.
And so what's been the impact so far? You guys have helped a lot of people.
Yeah. So we just updated this for the birthday. So we now have like 427,000 trained volunteer listeners, 189 countries, providing support in 140 languages. So it's like, and we didn't do, sometimes people say, what was your internationalization strategy? And we had none. It's just that people around the world need help and support, and some percentage of those folks sign up to be listeners. So we have this enormous international volunteer workforce. So that's that stat. We've sent about 1.3 billion, a little over that, like 1.3 billion supportive messages. And we've reached about 53 million people. And so in a lot of parts of the world, we've already reached somewhere between 1% to 5% of the population. And so there's this very cool, I like to think about it like community capacity. So like in these able companies as they evolve, I think a part of it will be real accountability around like things we want to make an impact on. Like we really want to help this population, or we really want to tackle this group. And I think eventually we'll see like shared dashboards on a regional basis, and then listeners from those regions driving the gains across those listeners and leaders driving the gains, across those things they're trying to make a dent in.
That's pretty incredible. It's 53 million people around the world.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, did you ever imagine that it would kind of reach that type of scale?
I was always really super hopeful. I was, and it's, these kind of conversations always, it's like they're brutal, right? Like every gain is you got to work for the gain. You got to figure it out. You bang your head up against the wall and you get beat up a lot. You make a ton of mistakes, make a ton of significant mistakes, but I think you just keep evolving it. So I remain like we've had tons of problems, still have tons of problems, still have tons of mistakes, but I really want us to build a really effective free mental health or emotional support system. Like that's what we're really, really trying to build. And like with your habit, like your app, anything that can be impacted by positive social support and behavior change, whatever that is, heart disease, obesity related disease, mental health, we want to be able to make a positive impact on those things. So if we're actually really successful, and this new book, how innovation works, basically says 15 years is what it takes to really cook up a really good innovation. And so we're 7 years in, we're not even halfway there. So if, it's still long odds, still very long odds, but like if we can figure it out, it'll be amazing.
So what are the things that are left to do for you?
Oh my God, there's tons. It's just like tons and tons. I mean, matching people up with the best listeners for them. Like we think about it like whatever you're struggling with, there's like digital medicines for it. Right. So like, and the medicines we provide are like chatting with a listener. That's a type of medicine. And then chatting with different types of listeners, you would be a great startup listener, right? That's a different type of medicine. Growth paths, we call them growth paths or treatment plans. So like what a clinician would, if you had panic attacks, they would walk you through a protocol, CBT protocol to help you overcome those panic attacks. So we have like 36 different paths, but there's probably millions of those steps and they can be reorganized and made differently. We're going to create something that we call the playlist where any kind of expert or other people can create their own growth path steps on 7 Cups. And so they can be voted up, voted down, and we'll probably learn a whole bunch of interventions that are effective that we didn't even know about. We don't know about now. So that's a type of medicine. And then the third type of medicine is community, just knowing that, hey, I'm not alone. There's other people like me. We're figuring it out together. So ultimately, we want to be able to say, okay, here you are. This is whatever you're struggling with. These are the right listeners for you. These are the right exercises for you. This is the right community for you. Maybe here's the other apps that are in this kind of consortium that we can recommend. And then we work together to help you get real outcomes in your life so you're happy. And you have less suffering. That's the vision. We're like 1,000 miles from that. We're 10,000 or 1,000,000. It's a long ways to go.
Is that kind of the primary North Star for the company, to reduce suffering in the world?
It is. Yeah, it really is. We're trying to decrease suffering, whatever way we can. That's
a great goal. So how's the process of starting this company? It's been you're 7 years in, which is I once heard that, 8 years is kind of the average time it takes to get some sort of outcome for a founder. That's actually exactly how long it took us to go from streaming camera on our head to Twitch exit. How's the experience been of starting this company in this, over this time? Like, what's it been like for you?
It's been, like we were talking earlier about the parenting, it was super hard early on because you just didn't know what you were doing. None of the infrastructure was built. And 7 Cups is different. It's like not a normal company. It's not like a widget where it's like, hey, we're just making widgets and now we optimize the widgets and now we increase the acquisition dollars to increase more widgets. Like, it's just like, it's a very unusual, like the complex adaptive system community. Like, it's a different type of thing. So like creating, co-creating with the community, because the community creates it along with us, with the team, with the listeners and the leaders, and we're all trying to figure it out together. It's been incredibly challenging. There's not many things like I had twins that were born 10 weeks early, premature. That was really tough. It was really, really tough. I've had a lot of pain in life, but I've never tried to do anything as challenging as 7 Cups. Like, it's been tough. It's been good. It's been really good. I've grown a tremendous amount, but it's been really, it's been tough.
What have been those hardest moments or inflection points for you?
I think it's like, I remember, sometimes people say like, hey, do you ever use the service yourself? 7 Cups. And it's like, oh my God, I've used it so many times, especially early on. I remember just like crying, like, just like like I would go on and I could never say like, hey, I'm the founder of this thing and I'm really struggling. Like, I don't know how we're going to make any money. Because what happened was we built the thing and we had figured out all those kind of early elements. We had no idea how we were going to make any money. And,
Right.
and everybody was sacrificing. Like, nobody was getting paid market salaries. Some people weren't taking a salary. Like, it was just a tough spot. And in the community there were some people in the community thought we were like selling all the data or like we had tons of money. And I, at that time was like I thought I can't tell them how bad it is. I have to pretend everything's great, and kind of, be the good leader. That's like, everything's fine. Don't worry, just keep listening.
Right.
And it was just killing me. I mean, I was like, I just could not sleep it just took me forever. And we would try different things. We tried monetizing the growth paths. So upgrade, and you unlock the depression growth path that barely moved the needle. And then we finally figured out online therapy, and that worked. But before that, I mean, it was just super tough. It was just like, we even went I went around with like my digital hat in hand, because at that time it was like, hey, just got to get a quarter from everybody. And it was like, hey, you want to give me a quarter? Hey, do you want to give me a quarter? And it was like, I don't want to give you, I really don't want to give you a quarter. Like, some people will, but like nowhere near enough. And so I remember going on the service and just being like, I have this incredibly challenging engineering problem. Like, I would frame it in ways that would not make it obvious that it was 7 cups, and I have a lot of people counting on me, and I'm terrified of letting them down. Yeah. And then, again, I guess why I'm so hopeful for all these like social challenges we face, you just incrementally stick at it, and, you make the gains, and it's brutal, and there's a whole bunch of challenges along the way, but you get there eventually, but at least some of the time. And, maybe enough of the time, we'll get there and we'll be able to make a real dent in some of these challenges.
Yeah, for sure. I found that those periods of, struggling, when I look back on them, I'm very thankful for them because they were periods of tremendous self-growth for me, where I like didn't know where things were, what was going to happen. I was very worried, and that they weren't all successful. I had lots of companies that ultimately failed, but I still am thankful for those periods of struggle because I grew a lot and learned a ton from them. Of course, it's easy to say now on the other side, but at the time, they seemed like often not times it was like the end of the world was happening, and I was the only one responsible for like everything that was going on and so many different people. And I didn't know what I would possibly do if I failed.
Yeah, exactly. It looms so large. It's the only thing you can see. And it is, but that's where you grow. I mean, that's where the person is made, right? Even then you don't want to, it's never fun going through it.
So the lesson for anybody out there who's starting a company or maybe considering starting a company, what's the 7 years encapsulated down into like the one thing for them?
I think it really is that stoic idea that the problem is the path. It's like the problem is your friend. You don't want the problem. There's a type of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. It's really powerful. You'd probably really like it. It's interesting. So it's basically this idea that problems happen in life, and they have a metaphor for the problem. It's called Aunt Maggie. And Aunt Maggie is your annoying aunt. You're in your house, and she's knocking on your door, and you're hiding in the back, and you don't want, she goes away, and then she comes back and she's knocking again, louder this time. And you just want to ignore her, and you just want her to go away. And then, but that just complicates things because the big problems never just go away. So it's like really in ACT, the goal is you open the door, say, hey, Aunt Maggie, how's it going? I don't really want to hang out or talk to you right now, but I'll tell you what, I just made some lemonade, I just made some iced tea. Let's sit down. Let's have a conversation. Tell me about what's going on. And then, and then in this, And then you have the whole conversation and it's horrible and it's painful. And then she leaves and, you get like a little gold nugget. You get like some kind of wisdom, or you get a key, whatever the metaphor is. You get something really valuable from solving that problem, whether it's personal growth, something for the company, something for other people, but it gets you something. And then that's the thing you need for the next level. Like if it's like a video game, it's like then you're into that key. And then of course you're on the next level, and Maggie comes back again, right? And it's like, but maybe it's different, but she's, it's even more annoying and even more problematic and even more challenging. And then you unlock that. But that idea that, when you're taking like a water or soda bottle, if you go to like a 7-Eleven and you take the first one and the next one slides down, I think the problem is the path idea, whether it be personal life and this is all principle stuff too, but whether it's startup, business, relationships, kids, whatever that next biggest problem is, if you just face it and you do your best to try to solve it, that becomes the path. And if you're successful, you're blessed with another problem. Like the next one comes sliding down at you, and then you just do that. And from an evolutionary perspective, or like an anti-fragile perspective, I think that's how you really evolve. And your person navigating life, or your company navigating the market that it's in, or whatever, I think that's how you evolve and grow the capacities needed to better navigate personal life or the market or being a dad or whatever.
That's beautiful. Just take everything one problem at a time.
I think so. I mean, it's probably very not a popular idea, but I think it's how we grow.
I find a lot of the issues that we tackle in startups are very daunting, right? Like the idea of like, how do you create this big company or giant system or fulfill your obligations to investors? And I always thought about, if I am faced with a problem I don't know how to deal with or solve, just how do you break it down into component pieces, and then break that down into smaller pieces, and just find the smallest increment of work that you can do, smallest problem you can tackle, and then just do that first.
Yeah.
And then once you do that, then figure out the next one, and in that way kind of build up momentum for yourself in tackling things that can ultimately be very difficult challenges.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And you build the muscles. It's like they can be just like these enormous things, but yeah, if you can break them down, it's like, well, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And then eventually maybe it's, mostly solved. You don't have any kids, right?
I have one.
You do?
I have a 10-month-old.
Oh, you have a 10-month. Congratulations. I didn't know that. Okay, boy or girl?
It's a boy.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, his name's Julius.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Okay, so let's say Julius, 20 years from now, or my son's 15. He's already thinking about this stuff. So maybe 15 years from now, Julius wants to do a startup. What's the thing that you would say, hey, this is the best thing about this? And then and then what would be the, hey, this is the worst thing about this? And you really gotta be ready for the worst thing. And I guess the best thing too, this is the best thing. It can be good, but you should also be mindful of this.
Yeah. So I think the best thing is clearly that it's such a vehicle for your own self-growth and self-awareness, and self-discovery. For my, all the things I've realized about how I show up in the world, what I struggled with, all the behavioral patterns that I had carried on from when I was a kid that were formed when I was younger. All of those things I realized through the pain of various stressful situations in startups. That's the best thing. And then obviously there's a lot of, if you're successful, there's lots of, nice things in society that you get from it. But I would say that's actually secondary. The bad part, the painful part, is going through that experience, right? Like there is human beings, like you said, flinch away naturally from pain. And there are a lot of painful experiences. Shut down a company recently and laid off 180 people. That was very painful.
Yeah.
I had to face a lot of my own demons around failure in that moment and letting people down. There are experiences where you feel like you're not going to meet payroll, or the site is down, and you know that there are people counting on it for their own help, right? Like to be connected with other people, and there's a technical failure and things shut down, and you're like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. This feels like the world is ending. And, that's the downside of a startup. So, they're kind of, it's two sides of the same coin in a way. Those painful experiences are what drive the growth, but you also have to go through those painful experiences. And, that's the best and worst part of starting a company.
Yeah. It's really interesting when you said the personal growth part. It's like when you were saying, it made me think of like almost like echoes, right? Like reality is bouncing off of you, and you're like learning about yourself through the way the pattern of reality is like the experiences are unfolding and hitting you. And then you have to kind of like learn and go through them and listen to what is the message kind of life is sending you at that time.
Yeah. It's an accelerated journey from what most people get to experience. Most people experience stressful situations and painful situations. They just don't experience them every day or every week. And so you have this accelerated journey, which does put you on a path that I think can be incredibly meaningful, and where you can learn a tremendous amount that you wouldn't be able to. But once you're on the roller coaster, it's really hard to get off.
Yeah. So that's like, I think the secondary question that would be like, hey, you are going to grow at an your personal growth, your overall growth, but your personal growth is going to go through this accelerator. You're going to live lifetimes in years. And I think that's a nice way of saying it. Like the number of stressful scenarios, like if you have a normal 9-to-5 job, you're not getting nailed frequently, hopefully. But in a startup, you're getting nailed frequently. So then what do you say to help Julius through that?
Well, to some extent, on one hand, one of my favorite books is this book, Siddhartha. And in the book, I don't know if you've read it, it follows the life of Siddhartha as he goes, through life. And my favorite part in the book is eventually he has a kid, and he becomes at the end of his life, he's like a river, like a ferryman. He like ferries people back and forth across the river, and he has a friend who's a ferryman, and his kid is now starting to experience life and becoming an adult and making all these mistakes. And Siddhartha asks his friend, he's like, how can I prevent my kid from making these mistakes? And his friend is like, that's part of the process. You can't prevent him. You have to go out there, and he has to go learn for himself. And I think in a way, that's kind of how I feel about startups, whether it's my own son or not, he will have to learn himself. That's kind of the point of the startup, but it really applies to anything you do in life and your entire journey. And so there's nothing really I can do to ease it. At the same time, I think that what I would tell him is probably what I've been talking about a lot publicly recently, which is that, just having a healthy base of personal wellness behaviors will allow you to be anti-fragile enough to tackle on these problems and have these emotional swings and experience these like ups and downs that you have when you're tackling any sort of hard problem, whether it's a startup or not. And so those are things, like meditation and exercise and diet, which help you be grounded in yourself. And I think avoid the worst outcomes of like the compulsive behaviors and addictions of being a human being.
Yeah.
And so if you can build that set of practices and give yourself that healthy base, I think you're best suited to tackle any of life's problems.
Yeah. So feel kind of like make sure you're fueled up and continue to fuel up with healthy, nourishing energy and resources so that you can get through.
Absolutely.
Because the temptation will those things, and those are things that's really good. So it's like, hey, before you start this journey, spend 6 months. It's interesting. It's like almost like a pre-elective, right? So like you're going to go into a startup, you're going to take the startup course. Hey, spend 6 months developing some really good habits and get really healthy. Because you're going to.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You know,
it's kind of like a personal performance, optimization in a lot of ways. Like when you are an athlete, right? Like you're a star athlete, you're a tennis star, basketball star, you're LeBron James, right? Or like Tom Brady, right? These guys don't just practice basketball or play basketball. They also have, wellness and dietitians and massage therapists. And like, they have like 20 people full time who help them be at their best, be at their most optimal. Now, you might not need a staff of 20 people or be able to afford it, or that might not make sense, but there's probably a lot of baseline activities that you should be doing that will keep you ready to, at your peak performance to tackle whatever it is that's coming up for you. And I think that really applies to everybody, really, in all aspects of life.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We find ourselves in these situations where we're so stressed in daily life, and we're so busy, and we think, oh, I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to eat healthy. I just need to eat something quickly. I don't have time to exercise. And there's some truth to that. People are very busy, and the modern life keeps us super busy and keeps us on this treadmill. But I think of those things as an investment. If you're investing even just 5 minutes a day of exercise, you're going to get that 5 minutes back. I guarantee it, right?
And
if you
more.
invest 5 minutes in meditation, you're going to get those 5 minutes back. You're going to get the value. You're going to see that value. And so, I think that's just part of a really important part of being grounded and well in your own experience.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like when you go through YC, right? Like they tell you like exercise and sleep well, right? But it's really what you're saying is like level that up a fair amount. Like get your tank, your emotional tank, your well-being tank, your wellness tank, get it so that it's high just regularly. And so when you're taxed, it goes down 20%, but your habits, the practices you've already been developing, grow it back up again. And then, so you're going to keep getting hit in life. Like football players are going to keep getting hit, but heal, recover, get strong again, heal, recover, get strong again.
Yeah. My meditation teacher talks about a window of tolerance, and that's like the experiential things, the things you experience in life that are happening, and like what is within your window of tolerance. That's stuff that you can metabolize and deal with. And then things that are outside, maybe they're too extreme. There's extreme pain, or there's, emotional discomfort that are just outside of your window of tolerance, and kind of, then you get frazzled, and you're kind of like get triggered and go off the rails. And I think about it as like, by doing these healthy things, you're increasing your window of tolerance. Yeah. You're able to deal with so much more. And I could see that, and anyone can do this experiment pretty easily. It's like you go to the next time, the next time that you are experiencing some sort of stress, there are things you can directly do to mitigate that, whether, like for me, it's exercise. Like if I'm going through something where I'm feeling sad in my experience, or depressed or stressed or angry, if I go and immediately do just 5 minutes of cardiovascular exercise, I will feel a lot different. And that's a, worthwhile investment to me. Yeah.
The resetting of the brain with exercise is just insanely powerful. It feels like it's like we're kind of gradually, unwillingly accepting the power of that. But I do the same thing with stress too. It's like you can be super stressed. I just go for a run, and I come back, and it's like, okay, things are fine. Like it's not great, but I can figure it out, or we can figure it out.
Yeah, there's a biological reason for that, right? Like your brain has an amygdala. It evolved to keep you safe, right, and create this fight or flight response, and hormones that are emitted when you are in situations where you feel like you're being attacked. Yeah. That's natural. That's human nature, and you can't fight against it, and you shouldn't want it to be different. That's part of the experience of being a human being. And so when you actually do something physical, some sort of physical activity, you're enabling yourself to like move past this, to release those hormones and move beyond it, and go back into your like neutral, natural, non-triggered state.
I think that window of tolerance is a cool idea too. It's like, and I think with startups, you can certainly get knocked out of your window of tolerance, right? It's like, and it's like, how do you get back? And that Scott Belsky idea of the messy middle. Have you seen that?
No.
It's really smart. So he talks about, that whole hey, great idea, trough of sorrow, and then you like kind of figure it out as it goes up. Yep. he has this idea that it's the middle, and it looks like, it's up, down, up, down, up, down, but you're going up. You're on a trend line up, but the downs, every down is painful. And so his point is optimize the ups and then endure the downs, because you're going to go back up again, but just endure them. And I think that's an insightful idea. So like with the window of tolerance, it's like every down, like laying people off, it's brutal. It's really hard. It's down, but you just kind of endure and get through it. And then you kind of go back up again. And then like you lose a major client or get in a fight or whatever. It's like all those downs. And then your capacity, I think, it does definitely grow stronger in your ability to better manage things.
Well, what I found, one of my I guess tropes or things I've struggled with my entire life is like, how do I connect more deeply with the people around me? I always longed for human connection with the people around me, and I kind of like didn't know how to get it. And in the past couple of years, I've really learned about approaching people with a curious mindset and being vulnerable, and how that drives human connection. And to me, that's maybe a little bit the more interesting thing than like I used to be in the world of ideas of like, what are you doing? Like what are the cool things you're doing? What are, what's your startup, whatever. And now that I'm connecting a little bit more on a human to human level, I think that's kind of what I want to make this about.
Yeah. I saw I read your Feeling Good post, and you're kind of letting yourself naturally compliment people, observe things about them, highlight things. And that's incredibly unusual, right? Like people don't do that, but it creates that connection.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that it's unusual, right? Because in our society, we have everybody's out here longing for human connection with other people, the people around them. We have the most depressed society that we've ever had. I mean, you know this better than I do.
Yeah.
We're people are surrounded by people and have so many mechanisms and means of communication with the people around them, and yet we feel as more isolated than ever.
Yeah, it's tragic.
Why is that?
Yeah,
it's almost like we don't learn, we're not taught, and we don't focus on the skills that help us connect with the people around us.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right, man. And yeah, it's not just this. It's not even really just the social skill development. It's like we were talking about. It's like all those systems that are. We just don't have the space to connect in a lot of ways, and we don't have the scaffolding or the skills to do it either.
Yeah, I want to double click on that actually. Like, how do you think that happens? Like, how do we? Are we lacking the space to connect with the people around us?
I think, this is funny. So we can edit this out if this is, but I was thinking about, I was telling my wife about you and, your story and the new app and, how you had said, you kind of got to the end of the road and it just wasn't that interesting. Or maybe it was interesting for a little while, but then it stopped being interesting. And it just wasn't nourishing. And then all these other things are like really nourishing. And so I was trying to figure out like, how do we consolidate? Because, I don't think it's like completely designed. I think a lot of it's unintentional, but we find ourselves not in a great place as humans, right? As humanity. Yep. And so I was trying to figure out what is like a simple framework to kind of diagnose the global problem. And then what is the simple framework that might highlight new systems? So I spent the morning thinking about that, to try to consolidate it. And I don't know if it's great or not, but it's like an MVP of kind of like the beginning of an idea around it, I think.
So what is it? I want to hear it.
So the basic idea is like, the broader, the first part is like, hey, there's all these surpluses, right? So right now in your life, you have a surplus of, let's call it's wisdom, right? So because not many people have done all that you've done. And of the people that do, almost nobody talks about it honestly. Right. You see glimpses. Like I remember at YC, and they bring the folks in every week, and some of them are folks that are successful in the past. Some are people that are successful, now. And sadly, some of the folks, and I remember this is 2013. I remember sitting there. It's like you're a billionaire. and you're sad. And it's like, and you're sad.
Kind of blows the mind.
It blows the mind. It's like, how can you have this magnitude of success? And what was even worse about it was you could hear them comparing themselves with other people still. It's like the relative wealth thing. Like, I have $5 million, but I'm poor because all my friends have 10 million. Or it's like, I've been this successful, but I feel bad about myself because I'm not that successful.
And no one ever believes it will apply at the next phase of their wealth or success.
Exactly.
To them.
Yeah. It's like a terrible video game, right? It's like, no, keep playing. But anyways, what I was saying is it's wisdom, but it's a discrete form of startup wisdom. Doesn't quite capture it because it's broader than that, but so that is your surplus now. There are a few people that have that surplus. And now you're using this podcast. So there's a whole bunch of people like me and other people that are in the startup or business or entrepreneurial or life game. And we have these open questions. We have these needs, these ideas. And you're connecting your startup wisdom surplus with founders. So you're building a bridge between those things. And it's free. It's at no cost.
Yeah.
And I think, so when you think about this societally, there are surpluses all over the place. So like Wikipedia, I think, is the best example.
Right.
Clay Shirky called it the cognitive surplus. You have all these very smart people that have mastery of all kinds of content domains. And then you have all these people asking questions and looking for information. And so Wikipedia was a bridge that unlocked the cognitive surplus. Habitat for Humanity. You have a carpentry surplus. You have people that need homes, and you have a carpentry surplus, and you match up the carpentry surplus with the people that need homes, and you get homes. AA, people that are further along the path of coping with alcoholism, people that are just starting the path, and you unlock that surplus of helping people. And I think there's all like I was just talking with a friend, Ryan, he was talking about the app that, people that can see. So somebody's, who's blind can say, hey, help me see this. And then they, put the app around. So there's a vision surplus. There's like all these amazing surpluses, but the systems we have are not lined up to unlock those surpluses and match them up with the people who have the needs.
Well, in a way, the internet is kind of like that, right? The internet is that connectivity layer that has allowed all of these marketplaces for various surpluses to create liquidity around the surpluses. Like eBay is an example where people can, have a bunch of stuff in their attic, they can sell it, other people who want it can buy it. And that was a marketplace that never existed before.
100%. I think that's exactly right. And it's like, so the goods or the services that are free and really helpful to solving other people's problems, I think in terms of these new systems, I think that's the liquidity that we need to open up.
Right. And we're in the process of discovering new marketplaces to unlock liquidity.
Yes. Yeah. So to get to my attempt at some kind of framework on this was, what if we think about team humanity, and what if we're under like some kind of DDoS attack? Right. So like in the D, the first D is denial. So we're like in kind of collective denial about the magnitude of our challenges. And in the mental health space, we've always been in kind of denial about how many people are struggling, but now it's even more so. And you can really look at any kind of part of the world, obesity, depression rates, suicide rates, there's a racism. There's a lot of signs that things are not good. Right. Yeah. So we're kind of in denial about it. And then the second D is like division. Like we're fighting with each other when really we need to be coming together to work together to solve these problems. The O is oppression. There's all kinds of oppression. A lot of groups are oppressed a lot more than others, but very few humans are flourishing. Right. There's just like not a lot of people you can point to and say, this person's doing great. Like there's a lot of people that are struggling. And then the S, and this is probably the most controversial, is sociopathy. And it's small. There's like, sociopaths are overrepresented in some leadership circles. and let's say 97% of leaders are not sociopathic, and they're really good people, they're kind, everything else, but there might be some percentage of people that have less remorse and empathy that are, leveraging having more of an impact in a negative way. And and they might not, and then there might even be systems that are set up that have more, predatorial outcomes than are designed on purpose, but just kind of evolve that way. And so, like, you think about like the food industry. So, like, we have a obesity epidemic in the U.S., and it's like, okay, everybody only has one stomach, but we need to grow the number of stomachs. So we make all this food that's addictive to get people the equivalent of two stomachs. And I don't think there's like an evil character in Kellogg's,
right. The evil mastermind who's saying this is the way to like increase obesity in the world. It's just a natural incentive due to the way humans are.
Exactly. And then, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. One of the core kind of ideas behind, I guess, the way I want to live now is that, human beings are running this model in their heads from a resource scarce environment.
Right.
Like, you when in the resource scarce environment of like humans involved in, you wanted as much food as possible, especially calorically dense, food. And so sugar is like amazing, right? If you can get sugar, you want to eat as much of it as possible. In the resource rich environment, like resource abundant environment, those running that algorithm doesn't make sense anymore, but we're still running it. And so that's why you have this, incentive to put sugar in everything. And then, people you have this massive obesity epidemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's
not an incentive. It's an incentive problem, but it's not malevolent. It's kind of not something that's naturally evolved, and the consequence of everybody running this outdated algorithm, and then, having this emphasis on short-term thinking.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you can make that argument in a whole bunch of domains where things are hoarded, not just for like it was a shortage, so
right. Information would be another one with, Twitter and Facebook, and, information used to be scarce. There wasn't a lot of it. You wanted to know everything that was going on around you. And then now, there's infinite information, and it's very addictive. And so you can get lost down the, rabbit hole in the Twitter sphere. And all of a sudden you're, shit posting Trump memes. That's,
right.
the natural evolution of human beings.
Right. Exactly. So to get to your point, like, why are we struggling with our connection? I think it's because there's I think we're under some, intentional, unintentional. It's a multivariable problem. But we're under a sort of DDoS attack. And then I think we have to begin to figure out systems like Ken and like Seven Cups, like others that are different, that provide new ways of kind of combating that and growing more healthy responses. And so my acronym for that is ABLE organization. So they're aware. So we're not in denial about our problems.
Yep.
We build new systems, because I'm not terribly bullish on our ability to overhaul the old systems. We lead with humility, and humility doesn't mean weak. Humble people are actually really strong. It just means you're listening, you're aware, you're realizing you don't know everything. And I think the last point is E. So ABLE in E is we expect more from one another. I think humanity it's like we're almost like kids, and we want these big institutions to be our parents and save us. And it's like, they're not going to save us, so it's like it's up to us to figure out and design new systems and really go the extra mile and help one another to begin to solve these challenges. So that was my attempt at, after our conversation and thinking about ways to capture maybe an attempt at a framework to say, was kind of a good way of understanding the global problem, and then what are some ways of maybe trying to solve it in a different way.
I like that. I like that it puts the agency, on ourselves to make a change in the world. And sometimes I feel like it's almost like a hopeless or like a very daunting task, right? To you have all this momentum for humans and human society thinking very short term and running this outdated algorithm that you can't really change, right? You can't reprogram the human brain. Well, you can, but it takes a long time and a lot of effort versus this like kind of natural instinctive programming. And it seems a very daunting task to change, but having that framework maybe is a good first step to having agency to feel like you can make a change in the world.
Well, I think with startups, like, I mean, if you think about Twitch or really anything else, like I think a lot of people that are not involved in startups, they don't know the process of optimizing something. Like that's kind of a secret, right? It's like, how do you take you walking around with a camera on your head, right? With Justin TV and then to $1 billion company like that. There's 10,000 optimization steps in there, probably more, maybe 100,000, maybe 300,000 optimization steps. So it's like, yes, it seems all these global problems we have, they seem like there's no way. There's no combination of variables. There's no steps. There's no metric board. There's nothing we can do to optimize and address those changes. It's like, look, if a kid can take a video camera on his head, I don't know how old you were when you started, and
23 years old,
23, and that can evolve into that. Odds are we can figure out a lot of stuff if we're working together.
So there's been a lot of negativity around the startup ecosystem, I think, from the outside world, as some of these companies have become giants, like the Ubers and Amazons and Facebooks of the world. And people have maybe latched onto some of the downside consequences of these companies becoming really big very quickly. Do you still think that startups are the solution to some of humanity's biggest problems?
I think the vehicle of a startup is incredibly powerful. I mean, when you think about types of ways humans organize, right? Like, so you've got governments, you've got universities, you've got religions, you've got nonprofits, you've got corporations, different type of corporations. And some of and all of those are, I think in all those things, there's tons of powerful ways that humans organize. But the startups, the YC particular training or whatever you want to call it, way of thinking, I think is pretty powerful. And I think you can anchor those systems. So like the startup is just a framework. It's just a mechanism. The values that you anchor it to, or the things that you commit it to, will drive the trajectory.
Startups themselves are a little amoral.
They're amoral.
And like it's an amoral, it's just a framework. And people forget that they tie the startup framework with maybe some of the negative outcomes they see. But when really it's, the startup framework can be applied to any starting value set or problem space that you're trying to tackle.
100%. So and that's where I think like the money thing can get a little complicated. If the drive is towards constant shareholder growth or more and more money, greater and greater revenue, in terms of these idea of able companies, these new ways of unlocking liquidity with people that have got it, I don't know if revenue first can be the driver. So in the value set of a startup designed to do social good in that way, I don't know if revenue first, that's a strong anchor. And there's an ocean. There are several oceans behind that. So to design it differently, I don't think that could be the first thing in that process. So it's weird. It's like a startup vehicle that's not revenue first.
Right. I was actually talking to Brian Chesky from Airbnb about this a couple months ago, where he was very interested in, are there new ways to design a corporation where you are putting other stakeholders first? Or maybe not first, but like even considering the needs of other stakeholders. Right now, it's your fiduciary responsibility as a executive of a company, a CEO of a company, to try to increase shareholder value as much as possible. That's your job, and you're actually obligated to do it. And so, his question was kind of at a corporate level: were there ways to, bake into the charter of the company that you're going to consider different stakeholders? And I think that's a really interesting question.
I do too. And I think the problem you're trying to solve, like for me in mental health, I don't think you can solve it I don't think you're going to make an enormously big mental health company by being revenue first. Because I think a lot of what you're focusing on is helping people that are suffering, human suffering. And so I don't think the route is, like there's a lot of online therapy companies, which are great. And we do online therapy too. But like, we're not going to, there's not enough clinicians in the world to solve all the challenges. There's too much demand, and there's not enough people that want to become psychologists or social workers or therapists or counselors to do that. So you have to work with, a very big volunteer. You have to train regular folks to help one another out in order to do that. So I think there's ways to justify that and say, hey, if you want to make a really significant impact in the world and have a big organization or a big company, you have to do those things in a different way. So like Chesky, the first Airbnb I stayed at was at YC. Awesome lady. Her name was Carol. She had a little house in Mountain View. She was a single mom. It was like completely unusual to me. Like I had never done it before. She wasn't home when I got there, and it was great. The next morning we got up to, she had breakfast, and it was like, you could see immediately this was a lady who was struggling to make ends meet. And here was she had an extra bedroom, and she was able to so I don't know. I think in his model, there are a lot of people that he's helping, or they're helping. It's a giant. I know it's a giant company now, but that they're helping. That could be. You could probably make a relationship between. This is how I'm helping all these individuals, and this is how it's also good for the bottom line. Right.
So, do you think I would ask, do you think you have to enshrine it in a corporate document, or is it sufficient that you have values as an organization that, put certain stakeholders first, right? Like one of the big values in YC companies is like talk to your customers, right? Like build for your customers. That's something that Paul Graham, when he started YC, was, kind of enshrined in he beat the drum of talk to your customers to every YC company. And that's really part of the ethos now. And many of, almost all YC companies that are successful start by really trying to provide a lot of value to their customer base. Do you think that's sufficient, or do you need something else, right? To make an able company, do you need to do some other set of things in the beginning?
I don't think all of this is super intuitive, and I don't think it's all the way figured out yet. So I think any kind of, I think it's excellent to have your values down and have them be real, like actually real, and then have your customers, or your users, or in our case, our community, they can really call you on it if it's not real. So I think it's more like, yes, definitely explicitly identify all those things in whatever ways you can. But then I think it's really create the culture that is those things. Like the culture is the implicit outworking. You have this kind of wisdom now that's a part of you. You've earned it. It's integrated into the fabric of who you are. You're not all of a sudden going to start behaving in a way that's anti what we've been talking about, because it's in you. And so I think in the culture of the company, in the team and the people and the community and the clients, there has to be an ecosystem where it's these ideas are not on a wall. They're in our hearts.
Right. They're a lived set of ideals and values. And I think that often, for my observation, is that younger founders or new founders are too busy. They don't focus on that in the beginning, right? They don't enshrine a specific set of values. They're not thinking exactly what kind of company do we want to build. They're just thinking of survival. They're like, okay, I want to build a company that exists, right? That's almost the first primary thing in their minds that they care about, which makes sense in a lot of ways, because you might not have the luxury of the mental space to think about the future. Some of the times when you're starting a startup, and the consequence of that is that the values enshrined in the company are random, right? They're the values that maybe they're their own personal values, or they're those of their co-founders and early employees. And some of them are probably good and some of them are maybe not so good. But those types of behaviors and priorities get perpetuated throughout the existence of the company. And eventually, very quickly, actually, it becomes too late to change it, right? It's your nimble speedboat has become a cruise ship in terms of the direction that you're heading. And from a values perspective, it's very hard to change and enshrine new values. And so the companies end up with values that are representative of kind of this early accident, some of which are usually pretty good if the company's successful, and many of which may not be very deliberate.
I think that's a great metaphor. Yeah, and then you end up, and then it's like too big to change, like you can't adjust it, and it's and I'm sure upon reflection, and I think it's a very good point. Like I think of Seven Cups a lot like a child. Like I've got 4 kids. I've my youngest just turned 8. Seven Cups just turned 7. Which is old from this kind of perspective, but it's like early on, it is like a kid in the sense that you're just you're not sleeping, you're just trying to keep the wheels on the thing, and you're like you can't. It's hard to have the bandwidth to be able to think about those higher level things in that. But yeah, I think it is super important to do it.
The kid metaphor is probably right, because I think a lot of parents, want to do their best, but they're so busy with the day to day at working at your job and trying to make ends meet that it's easy to maybe do things that are short term, good, like give your kid the iPad or something to they'll like entertain themselves. When you wouldn't, if you had more time and space, you might not want to make those choices, and that might lead to like downstream consequences when the kid is 5, 8, 10 years old or an adult. So how can you help people make those trade-offs differently? Like when you're, especially in a startup, you might want to think about your values, but you might be too worried about like, are you going to be able to make payroll next month?
Yeah. There's an interesting exercise you can do with individuals. Have you ever done this end of life exercise where you imagine yourself at your funeral? Have you ever done this?
Oh, I have. I don't know if I've done it. Not necessarily. I didn't hear about the exercise from anyone else, but about a year ago, I thought about I actually read this book by Frank Ostaseski called, oh man, I'm blanking on the name of the book, but he ran the SF Zen hospice for 20 years. Oh, cool. And sat with like over 1,000 people dying. And then this was all the things he learned from the dying.
Oh, wow.
I read the book and I was very moved by the book, and it made me think about like, what would I think of when I was dying? Who would I want to see, and what would I tell them? And I actually went through the process of writing it out, and I went to most of those people and I just said, hey, this is what I was thinking about my own death eventually, and what I would say, and who would I want to see, and what I would want to say to them. And you were on the list, and here's what I want to tell you. I said, I thought, why would I want to wait until I die?
That's super powerful.
Dying. I might as well just tell it to you now. And so, for a lot of people was, I love you, and I'm grateful for our relationship. For some people was, I'm sorry that I've let you down in these ways. But it's really a meaningful exercise for me. I don't know if that's where you were going.
No, but I think that's an awesome idea. I mean, if you ever wanted to write that up and share that, I think that's novel. I've not heard that. It's almost like a lot of people wait to give all their money away until they're dead, right? And it's like You're giving away emotional money, right? Like interpersonal kindness. Like maybe you'd write a letter. Like my mom wants to write a book that we give, she gives to the grandkids. But like, you're just saying like, there's no reason for me to wait. I'm just going to give it to you now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a cool idea. That's a very cool idea. And I've not heard of that. This exercise is where you're dead. So it's like a whole hypnotic process, but it's like, okay, you're driving down the street. You see, your family and friends, they're all parked along the side of the road. They're going into a building. You're curious. They can't see you for some reason, but you can see them. They look sad. They're all dressed in black. You go into the building. You follow them down this long corridor. Take a left. You go into a room. There's all kinds of people there. You walk down the center aisle, and there's a casket in the front. And you look on the casket, and it's you. And you're 80, 90, 100, 110, however old you imagine you're going to be when you die. So you're like, wow, this is really curious. I wonder what's going to happen. So you take a seat. And then your partner, if you've got one, comes up and says 4 things about you. If you've got kids, one of your kid comes up and says 3 or 4 things about you. A coworker says 3 or 4 things about you. And some kind of nonprofit or impact organization you're involved with, they come up and say 4 things about you. And the idea is that this is your compass in life. So rather than the clock, which is like, the tyranny of the urgent, whatever's urgent, we're scrambling, which is like, I think what we're talking about being a startup. But in your own personal life, this is, if you begin with the end in mind and you say, and I think a lot of this is Stephen Covey stuff, but if you say, this is where I'm going, this is what I want people to say when I die, you're going to have a pretty meaningful and fulfilling life along the way. And it kind of helps course correct you. It's like a compass where it's like, okay, hey, I'm over here and I'm making a ton of money or whatever, or now I'm getting accolades, but it's like, I don't care if at my funeral anybody's going to say,
he made the most money.
He made the most money, or whatever, or it's a big deal. Like none of that matters. So it's like you can kind of get back on track. So it's almost the equivalent of that for a company. It's like, not that you're dead, but like, let's say you're ultimately successful. What do you want? And I don't know who the stakeholders would be, but what do you want? You sell the company, or it's maybe it's better. Like it's a fully mature, high functioning company, and it's everything that you imagine it to be. What do these people say about it?
You become a Fortune 500 company. What do the employees say? What do the customers say? What do people write about in the press? All of those things.
Yeah. What do the people who love you say? What do the people who don't love you say?
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a fascinating exercise.
It's really good. I've done it a bunch of times. I did it with people on my team and other parts of life. And it's just anchoring because it's so easy, in a startup or just like in life in general to be running and not have that space to reflect.
I want to try that actually. If I like organizationally, I think that's an interesting organizational exercise. I'd love to try as I, think about new or build new organizations or, starting off with that. It seems like it can't hurt.
Yeah. It can't hurt.
Right?
Yeah. 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 And it seems pretty low risk.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for this awesome conversation. It was really good talking with you. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for helping me tell my story. Thanks for telling your story and for continuing to do this so that other people can hear stories that I think provide a map, permission, freedom, humility, and courage.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you for being here and being so open with me. That was a lot of fun.
This was awesome.
Okay, that was my conversation with Glen Moriarty. I hope you guys liked it. One of the things I really loved about our conversation was how mission-driven Glen is in building something impactful for people in the world. It's really a fundamental human need to be listened to and something that we've all experienced. And I personally am really fascinated by ways that we can use what we've learned in building technology, especially apps, that can help people with wellness and positive behavior change on a daily basis. This is something that I'm really interested in. I think there's this huge opportunity to improve human life through tech on an unprecedented scale today, but really only if we focus on it. And so I'd love to encourage more entrepreneurs out there to do so. So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. If you like it, you know the drill. Rate us 5 stars on iTunes. And you can hit me back at Justin Kahn on Twitter with feedback or comments, or just say, hey, I appreciated this. Love you all, and I will see you next week.